Torture has been a brutal reality for many unfortunate people, but the most unsettling fact about torture's brutality isn't its existence, but the way people have injected a perverted sense of creativity into the creation of devices designed to inflict pain. Here are 5 most gruesome torture techniques from medieval times. Sit tight and enjoy. The chair of torture, also known as the Judas chair. The chair of torture was a terrible device of the Middle Ages. It was used until the late 1800s in Europe. There are many variants of the chair. They all have one thing in common. Spikes cover the back, arm rests, seat, leg rests, and foot rests. The number of spikes in one of these chairs ranges from 500 to 1500. To avoid movement, the victim's wrists were tied to the chair, or in one version, 2 bars pushed the arms against armrests for the spikes to penetrate the flesh even further. In some versions, there were holes under the chair's bottom, where the torturer placed coal to cause severe burns, while the victim still remained conscious. This instrument's strength lies primarily in the psychological fear caused on the victims. It was a common practice to extract a confession by forcing the victim to watch someone else be tortured with this instrument. The time of death greatly varied, ranging from a few hours to a day or more. No spike penetrated any vital organ, and the wound was closed by the spike itself, which delayed blood loss greatly. The rack. The rack is commonly considered the most painful form of medieval torture. It was a wooden frame, usually above ground, with 2 ropes fixed to the bottom, and another 2 tied to a handle in the top. The torturer turned the handle, causing the ropes towards the victim's arms. Eventually, the victim's bones were dislocated with a loud crack. As the torturer kept turning the handles, some of the limbs were torn apart, usually the arms. This method was mostly used to extract confessions, as not confessing meant that the torturer could stretch more. Sometimes torturers forced their victim to watch other people be tortured with this device to implant psychological fear. Sometimes this method was limited to dislocating a few bones, but the torturer often went too far and rendered the legs or arms, sometimes both, useless. In the late Middle Ages, some new variants of this instrument appeared. They often had spikes that penetrated the victim's back. As the limbs were pulled apart, so was his spinal cord, increasing not only the physical pain but the psychological one of being handicapped at best. The breaking wheel. This device was used as a capital punishment during the Middle Ages. Reserved for hated criminals, the wheel always killed its victim, but did so very slowly. The wheel originated in Greece and quickly spread to Germany, France, Russia, England, and Sweden. The device consisted of a large wooden wheel with many spokes. The victim's limbs were tied to the spokes, and the wheel itself was slowly revolved through the openings between the spokes. The torturer usually hit the victim with an iron hammer that could easily break the victim's bones. Once his bones were broken, he was left on the wheel to die, sometimes placed on a tall pole so the birds could feed from the still living human. In France, many executioners used it, which caused lethal injuries, to make the victim's death faster. When extreme pain was desired, the victim just had his bones broken and left there to die. It could take up to 2 or 3 days for him to die of dehydration. The brazen ball. The brazen ball is an executionary device, first invented in ancient Greece. Its inventor proposed to the king the need of a more painful way to kill criminals. This was done hoping to dissuade the poor population from committing any more crimes. As the story goes, when the inventor finished the brazen ball, the king asked the inventor to try it out by himself. He then ordered him locked inside the brazen ball and set a fire underneath it. He was very pleased with the results. Being burned alive was a very exciting act to watch. When a victim is placed inside the brazen ball, he or she is slowly burned to death. This device gradually became more sophisticated until the Greek invented a complex system of tubes in order to make the victim's screams sound like an angry ox. Even though this torture was not used as frequently during the Middle Ages as it was used earlier by the Greek and Romans, it was still used in Central Europe. This torture is similar to being boiled alive. Saw torture. The saw was widely used throughout the Middle Ages, mainly because the tools required were found in most houses, and no complex devices were required. It was a cheap way to torture and kill a victim, who was often accused of witchery, adultery, murder, blasphemy, or even theft. The victim was tied to an inverted position. This had several benefits. First, it assured sufficient blood diverted to the brain. Second, it slowed down the loss of blood. And third, it humiliated the victim. Depending on the victim and torturer, the torture could last several hours. When a confession was required, the victim was frequently forced to watch someone else be subject to this method. If he didn't confess, he would be slowly cut in half. During the Inquisition, this method became even more popular, as the inquisitors traveled from village to village, often without any torture device at their disposal. While some victims were cut completely in half as a symbolic gesture, most had only up to their abdomen cut. This was done to prolong the time of death. So that's 5 most gruesome torture techniques from medieval times. What do you think was the most brutal on the list? Do let me know in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed and see you soon in another video.